Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestler Weekly Presents. I'm your host, Scottie Richardson, here for another week on YouTube here at 9 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully you are joining me right at the stroke of 9 o'clock. If you're a subscriber, you just got a little ding, a little alert in your email and in your inbox. If not, you're catching this on the retweet or the post on Facebook or hitting the link in the bio on Instagram. Wherever you find your Wrestler Weekly fix, we're glad that you're here. Today, a great episode planned. Got a special guest for you. And we're going to kick off the show right in our wheelhouse, which, as you know, is 1977. We love it. We love that year for so many different reasons. Pop culture, music. Who could forget this great album released in 1977, Love Gun, Kiss, one of my favorite bands. And I tell you what, my son Miles absolutely loves this band. He likes to go, and whether it's on vinyl, CD, cassette tape, or just digital download, he just loves the music. Also, he's got the Scooby-Doo Kiss. That may have something to do with it. But Love Gun, great album. Check out these songs: Love Gun, Christine 16, and how about Ace Frehley on Shock Me? I mean, just a classic. So pick up the album. Go to Raw Records here in Raleigh, North Carolina. We'll leave the information at the end of the show, and Alex will take care of you. So let's kick it off. We have got so many things to show you. Got the mags set up, got them all kind of all over the place. But a special show, and let's bring in my special guest now. You know him from Wrestling with Classics. That's right, Matty Montcalm.
Hello.
Matty.
What's up?
You are on Wrestler Weekly Presents, finally. Are you there?
Yes.
Are you excited?
Yes.
Do we need to take your temperature? All right, Matty, so much going on this episode. I want to tell the fans, I'm bringing you in early because I just am anticipating that this show is going to go, I hope, a little bit longer, maybe, we'll see. But we have so much we're going to jam pack into this 30 minutes. But here's just to let the fans know the deal. I was talking to what has become a great friend of mine, Bill Pavlik in New York. He is a unbelievable collector of wrestling magazines and has an extensive collection. And so we were talking, and he is not a fan of the posed magazines, meaning when Bill Apter was on, he talked about getting Ric Flair to pose for the magazine, or that first PWI where he had Dusty Rhodes and Mil Mascaras posed. He was not a fan of that. He was more of a fan of grappling, what I call grappling mags. And grappling mags, and we're going to go, is where you have wrestlers actually wrestling on the cover. And those were photographs that were taken by George and Bill at ringside, and many others, as you know, along the way. But we're going to show some of those magazines. But before we do that, I've got a couple things I want to show. Now, I obviously am a fan of posed magazines. I like them all. But what influenced me as a kid, and people that have read Family Bacon Wrestling understand this, but on the back, so for instance, this is a copy of November 1981 of The Wrestler, has Mil Mascaras and Bruno Sammartino on the cover posing for the shot. This one is signed by Mil, who signed it May 7th of 16. But on the back of that magazine is the wrestling album 4. And you can see all of these wrestlers that were featured on the mail-in magazine where you could get Wrestling Album 4. They're all posed, and all of those were individual magazines. And so that's what influenced me. So, Matty, what influenced you have you ever broken it down like that, pose versus grappling?
Not intentionally, but yes, I guess I have. I'm more for the pose. That's kind of what drew me into Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Is probably my favorite magazine, and they have a lot of the framed pose covers, and I just love those. I don't dislike the grappling ones at all. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I would definitely be a fan of the post, I guess.
Okay, and it's interesting because I've never really thought that deeply into it until Bill brought it up that he liked grappling, and then obviously I took it a step further and separated the two, but I think it's an interesting concept when you really start to break it down. And obviously I'm going to share this. I was going to save this for my season finale, but decided I'm going to do it right here, right now, with my good buddy Matty, and for you, the fans of Wrestler Weekly, and all of our friends and followers. But as you know, on the back of this Wrestling Album 4, you could get the mail-in copy. Now, here is a clean, what I call the clean copy with no autographs on it.
Yeah,
but Matty, as you know, what I'm getting ready to tell the fans here, I just got my personal copy of Wrestling Album number 4 back, and it is finally complete. Superstar Billy Graham was the last and final piece of the puzzle, but there it is in all its glory. Wrestling Album. Now, Reggie has one, so he beat me to the punch. But here it is, Wrestling Album 4, signed by everybody, posed. Now, I'm going to go more into detail on that later and talk about the stories. But, Matty, you know that this came in about a week earlier, so that is definitely one of our favorites.
Yeah, you drew me onto those wrestling albums. Now I have, I think, 3 of them now. They're in the middle of a home renovation, so it's kind of hard to...
Now, my wife and I love watching cooking shows and cooking contests and those kinds of things. And, for instance, Food Network Star talks about when you're presenting, give the fans a tip that they can use at home. So here's my tip of the day. As you know, everyone knows I'm a big collector of signed magazines. But I tell you, when you get to a point where you think, like this, for instance, this one is completed. But let's just say that I did not have a clean copy. So then that would be something that you can do as a fan. And I know, Matty, you do this. You have a copy that is clean, and you have a copy that may have signatures. And then I've seen some of your posts where you actually put them together. And I think that's a good tip for our fans.
Yeah, I like to, I go back and look at them a lot. To me, like nowadays, we have the internet, but back when I started looking at wrestling magazines, that was my internet pretty much,
Oh, absolutely.
History, rating-wise, everything about my teachers, some of my teachers in grade school probably still have some of my wrestling magazines. They take them from me in class all the time.
Yeah, I remember I was at a very strict school. I believe it was my junior year. And you had to, they were so strict. So if you brought magazines like Wrestling Magazine, Sports Illustrated, now wrestling magazines, I can tell you would have been banned at the school I was at. But even like Sports Illustrated, you'd had to take it to the office when you got to school. And then somebody in the back, I don't know, the Wizard of Oz or somebody in the back would look at it and then tag it. And if it was tagged, you could take it to school and read it during study hall, whatever. But if it was bagged, Ziploc, you're done. So, all right, now I've got a picture up for the fans to see before we get into our first magazine. But my good buddy Tommy Wildfire Rich, a shout out to you. He just came through successfully of hip replacement surgery, and his wife Terry sent me a great text and talked about he's full recovery, he's at home. So our thoughts and prayers are with you for a quick and speedy recovery. And let's segue that, Matty, into when you're talking about magazines with the grappling on the cover. I think we have to start with Sports Review Wrestling, February of '84. The Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer feud reaches a bloody end, the last battle of Atlanta. Matty, your thoughts?
Yeah, I spent years and years looking for that match just because I heard of, back then, it was like what you consider hardcore wrestling now.
Yeah.
But then the WWE Network just put it on the network just out of the blue one day. I loved watching it. I think it was it was good I thought it was a good match, but the people, a lot of people complained. I'm like, well, those people they've been happy if somebody died. But
Right. Well, and that's really part of the issue I think that we have with sports entertainment, quote unquote, today, is fans that grew up like us in professional wrestling and then kind of tinkered over and moved and accepted sports entertainment as it is. I think forgot, and I think ECW had a lot to do with it, but I think that there was so much hype around this match when you could not, no one had the video. There was a lot of hype. You had the magazines and you had word of mouth and you had people that were there. And so sometimes, as you know in life, the hype, doesn't always add up to the substance.
I thought it was solid. I thought it was really good, real solid.
I did too. I loved it. But there are certain fans that, like you said, unless there's fireballs and death, and I saw something on Facebook. I really shouldn't mention it to give these guys any kind of credit. But backyard wrestling, which I know Tommy Rich, he hates backyard wrestling. Talks about it all the time. Where you've got some guy, got hit in the head with a fire stick or something, and a car ran him over. I mean, guys,
ridiculous.
It is what it is, but it's not what we love. So,
no, not at all.
Now, this magazine is signed by Tommy Rich, and then it's also in the top corner, and I've had this mag on an episode, may have been last season, but in the top corner is Austin Idol and Stan Hansen, and Austin did sign this mag, and he signed it over Buzz. So that's not a Buzz Sawyer autograph. That is an Austin Idol autograph.
When I first seen that, I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute, that's Idols.
Yeah. You would be the so-called champion in our circle if you had that with Buzz. Now, when we talk about grappling matches, now this is a magazine that I talked about in my book. And by the way, if you have not picked up a copy of this book, Family Bacon Wrestling, on Amazon right now, search Family Bacon Wrestling. You can get your copy today. But here we have Inside Wrestling. This is the magazine that we always say, Reggie and I say, got us banned. Obviously, Kevin Sullivan in Florida, in Championship Wrestling from Florida, had a lot to do with it. But this magazine in particular was on the top of my stack as a kid. This is from March of '79, and my dad just did not like the blood on the cover. It's Blackjack Mulligan. He has the Claw and Harley race. Now, I went back and had my mom, my dad, and Reggie and I signed this for posterity. But Matty, this is one of your favorite feuds.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Harley Race. He's the close. Ric Flair's on top of my mountain, but Harley Race is definitely a very close second. But Blackjack Mulligan, I love both of them guys. And that magazine, I've had it I got lucky when I'm only 33, going on 33. So a lot of this stuff is basically not rewritten, but I'm looking up history and stuff.
Sure.
I had an uncle that gave me, I'm talking, in town here we have egg boxes at the local grocery store, and they're huge. Yeah. And I had 2 egg box size, just full of wrestling magazines, and this was the first one on top of that stack, and I went through this 100 times probably, but I just love Mulligan and I love Race. And you couldn't get a better shot than that right there. That's a great cover.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I don't want to give away a whole lot of the stories from my book, but my mom bought my copy of this that obviously, as you know, Well, I don't want to give it away, Matty. I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
Let the fans read the book to figure out what happened. But I
Can
would.
I say something about your book real fast?
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, I'll just give it a little plug.
Go ahead.
It's like you don't have to be a fan of wrestling. You don't have to be a fan of. I mean, if you're a fan of anything and a collector of anything, you would thoroughly enjoy this book. It's phenomenal. I've read it a couple times myself, and I mean, I can't plug it enough. You guys, I mean, people, if you're second guessing it or whatever, I mean, I guarantee you've spent money on worse stuff. You will not regret this book.
I should use that. I'm gonna tell Mike we got to use that as a plug. As a you have bought. You have what was your line? You have bought worse stuff with your money. So.
Yeah, you bought worse stuff with money. It's just a collector's book for a collector. I mean, it's great. It's a fan's book. You know what I mean?
Well, that was the idea, and I will just say my mom bought my copy of this at a yard sale, and brought it home to me. And had some stuff for Reggie, but it's a magazine that obviously showcases some good old school classic wrestling on the cover. And so real quick, Matty, before we jump into a couple more, tell the fans Wrestling with Classics, what's going on, what you're doing, where they can find you, and let's get that.
On Instagram and Facebook, you can find me at Wrestling W Classics, and then on Twitter, you can find me at Wrestling with Class. I'm basically just showcasing my collection and just enjoying conversation about the good old days of professional wrestling. I pretty much anything from 1970 to about, I'd say, 1993-ish.
Right.
I love to discuss. I mean, I really can't talk too much about the current product because I don't watch that much. But Scottie, I have tape DVDs of pretty much any and everything I get my hands on, and some stuff that other people don't have.
Right.
But I'm just showcasing collection. I'd like to get a YouTube page going here shortly, but my renovations in my basement is finding one thing after another that we have to replace. But it's finally done, since now we just got to get walls up and everything. But just trying to contribute in some possible way that I can.
Absolutely. And Matty has become a tremendous friend of our brand at Wrestler Weekly, and we collaborate on a lot of different things. And he does, I always call him my director of research. So he can find it. So
yeah, that's what I always say. I mean, I've been looking for some stuff for years, and then some stuff I just get lucky on, but I usually find stuff when I'm not looking for it. So
absolutely. Next mag I've just put up here, Matty, and I want to kind of segue into a little bit of a section here where the magazines talked about and had matches where wrestlers were going for the title, and those were always great feuds or matches. But here in particular is the Wrestler September of '76.
I remember hearing about that, and I had the privilege when I was very younger to meet Bruno. But this is the time before camera phones, so I'm talking. My mom's still driving me around, but and I actually mentioned that to him, and he looked at me and he said, "How do you know about that?" And I said, "I read it in the magazine." And here I am, barely able to reach a table. And he's just like, he was flabbergasted that I think somebody my age would know about that. But I mean, that's always been my life, just with wrestling, the older it is, the better it is to me. But
absolutely.
I'll never forget Hanson's Hall of Fame speech. He got inducted to WWE's version of the Hall of Fame. And he said that he broke Bruno's neck, but Bruno never gave him any backlash for it. Pretty much kind of understood that it was just something that happens in the ring. And I mean, I thought that was really cool. I mean, I figured he'd catch some heat for it. But I mean, with what he said at the Hall of Fame speech, he said, Bruno was cool about it. And they, went about their way. And I think the feud even continued after that, didn't it? When Bruno came back, they had at least a match, I believe.
Yeah, and what's interesting when you look at this match and understanding now, fans, that what would happen a year later when you've got superstar Billy Graham now taking the title. But here is Stan Hansen, and I'm always intrigued. Matty and I have had numerous conversations about this, but I'm always intrigued about guys that potentially were in matches, were in feuds as a quote-unquote tryout, just to see how they would have done. Obviously, I wrote an article about Ken Patera in 1980. Matty, I think Matty's a big Ken Patera guy. We agree that Ken should have had a run with the title, but here are guys that we're going to showcase that potentially could have had a run.
Yeah, Hansen could have been a great heel champion in my eyes. I think we would have seen, not that he was good or anything back then, but he progressed, and Stan the Lariat Hansen, I think we would have seen him a lot earlier.
Right.
The Lariat Stan Hansen, had he got the belt at WWF or WWF, they were a face. They always had a baby face for a champion back then, it seemed.
Sure.
Until Superstar took over, but he even kind of became a baby face if you think about it.
Yeah, he turned them. He turned the fans, and they turned him. Back to face. Now here is a magazine, and I've talked about this before on Wrestler Weekly Presents, but it slides in great with this conversation. When you talk about guys that could have had the run and grappling on the front of the mag, but here is Greg Valentine, Bob Backlund, February of '82, Inside Wrestling, why Greg Valentine is the rightful WWF champion, and he has got the belt around the waist. This one is signed by Greg Valentine, and as you know, I'll have Bob Backlund take care of that in November at WrestleCade. Talk about Greg Valentine as a potential run as WWF champion.
Greg Valentine, definitely, I think he could have been a WWF champion as well. He was... I explained, if I was to explain to somebody that Greg Valentine has never heard about Greg Valentine, I'd say the quiet working horse, you know what I mean? Did most of his talking in the ring, but then again, back then, he did talk,
Sure.
People think about Greg Valentine nowadays, it just sickens me, because, they talk about rhythm and blues or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh. But he was phenomenal. Greg Valentine, who better... not just a WWF title, but I think he could have had an NWA title run at one point, even if it was, I hate to use this term like a Rich run, Tommy Rich run, but I wouldn't care if it was, 2 days or 3 days or 8 days or 2 weeks, The NWA champion was the NWA champion in my eyes. But the man, he did it all. You look at the Mid-Atlantic area, he won everything. You go to Missouri, he won the Missouri title. You go to, he won the NWA US title. The WWF Intercontinental title.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing he didn't win was the big one. It seemed like he was always built for it, and I don't know that.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is Greg, obviously, I grew up when Greg was on TV in the Mid-Atlantic, late 70s. But there was a point in time where when he had the U.S. title, Bob Caudle, David Crockett, Greg Valentine was considered at that point the greatest United States champion of all time.
Oh,
and that was one of those where you kind of felt like he was going to make that step and make that run. And I'm showing the fans a photo of Greg inside this magazine. Is a great photo of him wearing the WWF title around the waist. And so, definitely I think that. Let's jump to one of the things, a couple with Dusty Rhodes. Now, Dusty Rhodes, Bill Apter talked about it. If you put Dusty on the cover, Stanley Weston knew that the mags were going to sell. And obviously, when you talk about feuds, we touched on Superstar Billy Graham a little while ago, but who could forget? And we've talked about this before on Wrestler Weekly Presents. If I can speak, I'm so excited. But check out this mag signed by Dusty Rhodes and Superstar Billy Graham, the famous Texas death match, bull rope matches in 1977.
Yeah, they had 3 matches.
Right, 3 matches. Yep.
The bull rope one.
Yep.
mean, okay, this is my perspective on this feud. They didn't even have to go in there and wrestle. The promos leading up to it could have just sold the show. I'm serious.
Oh, yeah.
Two of the best promos in the business.
Absolutely.
And you're so into it and everything. And to me, it's still weird seeing Dusty Rhodes in a WWF ring anytime.
Yeah.
But I mean, it happened, and I mean that could have been had that happened, had they put the belt on Dusty Rhodes, we might be saying Hulk Hogan who right now.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine Dusty in Madison Square Garden? That marriage? I mean, that's a marriage made in heaven.
Oh yeah, I mean, he went nuts. Oh man, he was that man was on fire for so many years, and I've told you the story about Dusty Rhodes, so I got a special place for him in my heart. Right. I mean, it's just like he's one of. I mean, in Superstar Billy Graham back then, you're just, oh man, you're putting thunder and lightning together. And
that's right. Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at putting two icons in the ring, obviously, I'm writing the book about the Super Bowl of Wrestling from '78 with Harley Race and Superstar Billy Graham and that battle. But Superstar Billy Graham, 6 months before that, in this feud with Dusty Rhodes was hard to beat.
Oh yeah, that was just it. You just doesn't get much better than that. I mean, you got two guys that can talk their butts off, and then they can work in the ring. And I just, that's one of my favorite what ifs in wrestling. What if Dusty would have won the belt in WWF back then? Yeah. I could change the course of anything, I could have changed it. I mean, the NWA, because he was booking there, so if he'd have won the belt there and stayed there, I mean, so much could be different nowadays. But
yeah, he may have had a unification situation where actually it happened,
I could have been a fly on the wall in that booking office because how do we not put the belt on Dusty? I mean, they could have got another year out of Graham and Rhodes,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
easily.
If I'm trying to, really think about this, but I think you almost have to go to Flair Dusty, the feud, to see two guys that could promo the way these guys could and put butts in the seats, as they say.
Agreed, totally.
All right, let's real quick jump to Nick Bockwinkel, who I talked about with Dave Milliken early this season. But here are two magazines, and these are fantastic when you think about it. But Dusty Rhodes, we talked about him with the WWF title, but here's a magazine from April of '82 where Dusty, and it says, Vern Gagne has written the article here, only Dusty Rhodes can save the AWA from Nick Bockwinkel. Dusty versus Nick. What do you think about that, Matty?
Oh, man. That's another good one. Those two, they had unbelievable promos too. Yeah. Bockwinkel's the type of guy that you sit there and watch as a wrestling fan. I mean, I got a little bit of schooling behind me, so I could but I just see like a kid sitting there watching AWA, listening to Nick Bockwinkel, and be like, man, I don't know what he just said, but I can understand it.
Yeah,
he just used all these $5 words and everything.
Yeah.
I remember growing up listening to his promos, especially when YouTube hit. I'm like, what does that mean? And he's looking it up. But for tit for tat, these two guys, I mean, and in the ring again, it's that people, a lot of people talk about that, sprinkle some of that Hogan dust. It's like, I'd rather get sprinkled by that Rhodes dust because it's I mean, AWA, NWA, and WWF. I mean, we talked about that earlier, and now we're talking about, what would have happened if he would have actually got the AWA belt?
Oh, man. Absolutely.
Would we still be talking about the AWA today?
Yeah.
I mean, talking AWA today. But that could have been, and all of them would have looked good on him, you know what I mean? Right. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. And for the fans that missed episode number 2, when I went in depth with Harley Race versus Billy Graham, belt versus belt, and I'm writing that book, hopefully to be released next year. But should be great.
One of the things that I will tell the fans, and go ahead and again break some news here, but at the end of that book, I'm going to tease the other matches that happened after Race versus Graham in Belt versus Belt. And I've already conducted quite a few interviews for the follow-up to that, the Super Bowl of Wrestling, which is not the working title because obviously I can't use Super Bowl NFL rights, but Belt for Belt book. The second part of that, I'm going to go in depth on the matches that happened after Race and Graham. And one of those is right here, August 79 magazine of The Wrestler, Backlund versus Bockwinkel, the match that changed wrestling forever. Backlund, the champion, versus Bockwinkel, the champion. Matty?
Well, I have yet to see that match. And I can't believe that I haven't. But I'm definitely going to. I won't be saying that next week.
Yeah, your director of research has got to do some research here.
Oh, definitely. I'm guilty of I'm guilty of that. Well, before me and you have talked, but before me and you talked, I was guilty of being. As we talked and stuff,
Right.
Now I've seen everything Backlund's done, and I kick myself in the butt for not watching it before. Backlund had really good matches with Harley, and he's one of Harley's guys. He was trained beneath Harley. I've recently been trying to find some footage of Backlund versus Jack Briscoe for the Missouri title.
Yeah.
Because if I could compare Backlund to one guy, it would be Briscoe for sure.
Sure.
And just to see them guys lock horns would be unreal, I think. I watched Briscoe and Inoki, and I liked it, and I think Backlund and Briscoe could probably be better. Backlund and Bockwinkel, though, those guys, that had to be a great, great match. Technician and everything, and the storytelling and that thing. Bockwinkel's good at, starting off easy, and then, picking it up, telling the story, and Bockwinkel's definitely in my top 5, and that match probably was unbelievable.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet Bob Backlund, and I asked him about this match, and he talked about how had he not had the matches with Harley, then he would not have been able to perform at a top level against a guy like Nick Bockwinkel. He just really thought that Nick was a gentleman in the ring. He was a professional. He understood what was going on in the ring at all times. And it really made Bob remember, Bob was a young guy back then when this match happened. And Nick was a really great veteran, as you know, at the time that this happened. And so I thought that was really great information. And obviously he went into more detail, which you'll find later on in my book that'll come out sometime in a couple of years for this Belt versus Belt. But Matty, again, tell the fans where they can find you.
On Twitter, I'm at Wrestling W Class. On Instagram and Facebook, I'm on Wrestling with Classics or Wrestling W Classics. Like I said, I just post pictures of old school wrestling and stuff that I find interesting, and then pictures of my collection and stuff, and not to take anything away from Wrestle Weekly, but it's kind of what they do. They got more of you guys got more of a schedule going on. I just randomly post up all the time.
And before we say goodbye, Matty, think about this real quick. I'm going to put you on the spot. Think about these 2 questions for the fans. I know they're interested as collectors. Your number one, right now, I know it changes, but your number one item in your collection. So what's at the top of the Wrestling with Classics mountaintop? And then what is maybe something new, that one of the latest additions to your collection? So your top one and maybe something that's new.
Top one is definitely my Starcade '83 program.
There you go.
It was signed by Ric Flair.
Awesome.
And I was signed by Harley Race, or I'll die trying. My number 2, that's kind of tough because I just got in Atlantic magazines that actually you kind enough to suggest me emailing somebody, and I did, and I got those. You've seen them, but I haven't posted them yet because I'm just trying to figure out when to post them.
Right. And
I think I have to now, though.
well, it got our audio got cut out a little bit, but he said what he said, fans, is he picked up some Mid-Atlantic magazines and those magazine programs, which are fantastic, and we've spotlighted them on our show. So he's going to post those for you, and hopefully you will see those. And man, what a great show. We flew by the Grappling Mags. So there's something for fans to go out and look at. You've got your posed mags and now your grappling mags. And so fans, again, thanks for joining us. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Wrestler Weekly. T-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com/WrestlerWeekly. Pick up the book, Family Bacon Wrestling. Follow Mike Leotis because he's our Wrestler Weekly Live guy on Tuesday nights at 7:30 p.m. And he's also my special guest next week. So come back next week. Until then, fans, so long for now.